Hey everyone, it's Lexi. So in today's video, I'll be sharing with you all the books that I ended up reading in February, in addition to books I plan on reading in March. So February was the month of like a really big book, a few audiobooks, and there was a bit of traveling in between. I got The Plague, which you can kind of still hear with me, so I didn't get as much reading done as I wanted to. So I'm a little bit behind on I'm still ahead of my reading goal, but I just felt like I just didn't get around to as much reading as I wanted to, just because with being sick and traveling and being tired and all that stuff. But nevertheless, I really enjoyed all of the books that I read this month. So without further ado, let's get started. So continuing on with my audiobook series rereads, I finished Cress and Winter by Marissa Meyer. And I read this series when it first came out. I remember when it was like really big on booktube, maybe like over 10 years ago. So it's been a while. I remembered some details, but not all of them. So it was fun to revisit this series. I remember Cress being my favorite out of all of the books in the series. So I would say it held up pretty well. So if you don't know, this series there's 4 books in the series and they each follow kind of different fairy tales. So the first one is Cinder, which is like Cinderella. The second one is Scarlet, which is Little Red Riding Hood. Cress is Rapunzel, and Winter is Snow White. So the way this kind of series works is that we follow our main character, Cinder, who lives in this futuristic world where people live on the moon, basically, and there is an evil queen that lives on the moon, and she ends up kind of getting thrown into some politics and goes from there. Like I said, this book series, I think, having reread this series, I think really holds up quite well to my memory, and they're just fun. They can be, serious at times. I think this author really shines with her banter between the characters, so I really enjoyed those aspects of the series. So it was really fun to revisit, and they hold up really well to my memory of them, since I haven't read them since. So Cress, I gave a 5 out of 5 stars, and that was the rating that I gave it last time. I think this one, like I said, was my favorite in the series. I really love kind of Thorn and Cress and their relationship dynamic, and we also get more of a ensemble cast of characters, and this is where kind of most of them have been introduced. So I love seeing the interactions, the politics in play, all the stuff, and this one's super suspenseful and action packed as well, so that made it a lot of fun. So obviously I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars, and then I finished up the series with Winter. This one I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. Winter, again, isn't necessarily my favorite character, but I felt this was a very good conclusion, and it was the same rating I gave to it when I first read it how many years ago. So I really enjoyed this. It was really fun to go and listen to this series and kind of be back in this world and be with these characters. And the audiobook narrator does a fantastic job. So if you're looking for a fun audiobook series, I highly recommend that you check this one out. And lastly, most of my month was spent dedicated reading this mammoth of a book, which is The Hallmarked Man by Robert Galbraith. This is the most recent installment in the Cormoran Strike series. Basically, the premise of this series is that it follows a private detective named Cormoran Strike and his business partner, Robin. This one in particular, they are approached. They own a private eye, investigation company, and they're approached by this woman who's not convinced, or she's convinced that her boyfriend who disappeared is a unidentified man who was found murdered and mutilated in a silver shop vault. And it kind of goes from there. There's a bunch of different, other side things going on this one, but really the driving factor in this is the relationship between Cormoran and his partner Robin. And this one really, my sister has read this series, and she read this before me, and she's and I was if these two don't kiss at the end of this one, I'm gonna be really mad. And this one ends on such I was not expecting this ending, and oh my goodness, I think it makes me very excited for the next book or the next installment to see what happens. I've heard in an interview that the next one starts 5 minutes after this one, which is really exciting. But yeah, this one was really interesting. I think there are so many kind of red herrings and kind of paths that they were going on that you would be like, okay, like I see this working out, and then it's like, you know, a dead end. And there's so many moving parts that it made it really go by quickly. This book is quite massive. It's kind of, you know, 900 pages, but it doesn't read like a 900 page book. That's what I felt with a lot of these. I think one like is close to 1,000 in this series, and it doesn't read like that. I just am totally immersed in these characters, their relationships, the murder mystery. It really keeps me on the edge of my seat. Overall, I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's definitely one of my favorites in the series. Nothing will beat Career of Evil, but this one I did really enjoy. My only complaint is that I think it was a little slightly long, but I still really enjoyed this overall. So like I said, this was a really, great book, and I'm definitely really, really excited to pick up the next one whenever it comes out. So let's move on to my March TBR. So kind of continue on, there's a few side books in the Lunar Chronicles to kind of conclude my Lunar Chronicles audiobook reread. So the next two are Stars Above, which is a collection of short stories following the different characters, and then also Fairest, which is kind of a villain origin story for Levana, who is kind of the main antagonist of this series. So I've read them again. Like I said, I've read these when they came out, but I don't remember too many details. So it just kind of continues on, and it gives me a little bit of time to figure out which series I want to reread next. I'm kind of torn between ACOTAR, Throne of Glass. If you've seen my series I want to read book series I want to reread in 2026 video, I kind of talk about some of the ones that I'm interested in, so let me know what your votes are from there, and then I'll kind of decide, because I haven't figured it out yet. But yeah, so I'm just going to continue on. I think these ones will be, probably will, take me the month or so. I listen to them when I go take Willow for a walk, or if I'm puzzling, I'll have my audiobook going. So these are kind of the two that will keep me busy in March. Next, this is a book I'm about a third of the way through, and I picked it up right after I finished the Cormoran Strike book, but that was when I got sick after visiting a conference. So I haven't really picked it up just because I've been kind of very drained and not feeling well. So it is The Fallen and the Kiss of Dusk by Carissa Broadbent. This is the second book in the Shadowborn duet duology. But basically the premise of this story, because it is kind of basically a part 2 to the original duology, I don't want to spoil too much, but the premise of this is that there is a world with humans and vampires, and our main character in the first book is a human that is raised in kind of a very powerful kingdom within the vampires, and she goes and competes in this kind of very prestigious competition that is hosted by one of the goddesses of their world, and if you win, you are granted a wish by this goddess, and kind of goes from there. There's a lot of politics, there's a lot of a bunch of other stuff going on within this fantastical setting, and this duology in particular follows one of the side characters of this one. So like I said, I'm about a third of the way through. It took me a while to kind of remember some of the details. I had to find a summary just to kind of the first book in this duology, just to kind of get refreshed with it. But I am enjoying it so far, but like I said, I had to put it down just because I wasn't feeling well. But I'm definitely going to be picking this up this week and kind of diving in. So these next two are ones that are carryover from my February TBR, just because I didn't read as much as I planned, just with, traveling and getting sick and all of that stuff. So these are kind of just carryover that I'll go through quickly. But I first have The Spy Coast by Tess Gerritsen. I think this would be a good palette refresher after this book. So I think this one will kind of just, help, take a break from a dense fantasy book into one that's a little bit shorter. So this one says, former spy Maggie came to the seaside village of Purity, Maine, eager to put the past behind her after a mission went tragically wrong. These days, she's living quietly on her chicken farm, still wary of a blowback from the events that forced her early retirement. But when a body turns up in Maggie's driveway, she knows it's a message from former foes who haven't forgotten her. Maggie turns to her local circle of old friends, all retirees from the CIA, to help uncover the truth about who is trying to kill her and why. This martini club of former spies may be retired, but they still have a few useful skills that they're eager to use again, if only to spice up their rather sedate lives. So this one just seems interesting. It's kind of giving me Thursday Murder Club, where it's kind of people that are, you know, past their career prime, but are still like intellectually sharp. And I think this one just seems interesting and suspenseful. I haven't read a Tess Gerritsen book in a really long time. Like, she is one of the authors that really got me into, like, she is the author that got me into like crime series with the Resilient Isle series and some of her other books as well. So I'm excited to kind of dive into this one. Next, this is one I'm really excited about, and it is Wild Reverence by Rebecca Ross. I've heard really great things about this one, so I don't want to get my hopes too high, but it just seems like really fun and interesting. But it says, born into the fire-lit domain of the underrealm, Matilda is the youngest goddess of her clan. Blessed with humble messenger magic she uses to carry words and letters through the realms. But the gods will kill for power, and Matilda holds a secret she must hide from even her dearest allies. And there is a mortal who dreams of her, though they have never met in the waking world. 10 years ago, Vincent wrote to Matilda on the darkest night of his life, begging the goddess he befriended in dreams to help him. His request went unanswered, and Vincent becomes a hardened, irrelevant ward of the river who has long forgotten Matilda, until she becomes tumbling into his bedroom window with a letter for him. Matilda and Vincent are fated to find each other beyond dreams, but to rewrite the blood-soaked way of the gods, Matilda will have to face something she fears even more than losing her magic, finally allowing herself to be loved. Like I said, I've heard great things about this one, so I'm excited to dive in and, you know, see how I feel about it. Lastly, this is a book that has been on my TBR for a while, and I feel like this is kind of, now that we're transitioning into springtime, I was like, this might be a good, again, kind of a palate cleanser from some of like the heavier, more intense reads of like the winter time that I tend to kind of focus on. And this is Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. I always forget how much I love Fredrik Backman's writing until I read it. I've read his like Beartown trilogy I really enjoyed. I read My Friends, which came out last year, and this is one, again, that's been on my shelf that I just, for some reason, haven't gone around to it, but I think it's one where it's just like, once I have it in my hands and I'm reading it, I'm just going to be totally engrossed because of the characters and the world he's able to build. But it says, looking at real estate isn't usually a life or death situation, but an apartment open house becomes just that when a failed bank robber bursts in and takes a group of 8 strangers hostage. Each of them carries a lifetime's of grievances, hurts, secret, and passions that are ready to boil over. None of them is entirely who they appear to be. In short, they are the worst group of the hostages in the world. But as the minutes tick by, they begin to suspect that the criminal mastermind holding them hostage might be in need of more rescuing than they are. As the authorities and the media surround the premises, these reluctant allies reveal surprising truths about themselves and set in motion a chain of events so unexpected that even they can hardly explain what happens next. So again, this one, I want to really pick this up, and it's like a short book too. Like, it's just over 300 pages. So again, it'll be a kind of a good palate cleanser after kind of these more dark, you know, long fantasy books. So I'm excited. I think this author does a really good job at characterization, creating really complex and you know, 3-dimensional characters that you really care about. So I'm really excited to dive into this one. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what some of the books that you read in February were and which ones you're looking forward to read in March. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.